Hi, this is Scott Arnaud here with this week's security tip. Today let's talk about encryption. Encryption is a way of scrambling data so that someone who gets a hold of it can't actually read it. Now that's done by using an algorithm. So mathematically, the pictures, videos, letters, whatever it is you have is scrambled into some unreadable code. If you're curious to see what it looks like, there's actually an example of encryption in the slideshow at thesecurityadvocate.com along the top. Now, what's so great about encryption? Well, in effect, what it creates is a secure data breach. So even if your data is stolen, what the thieves take away, it's literally gibberish. They can't make anything out of it. Now, this actually happened with a well-known company called Zappos. You may know of them. They mainly sell footwear and some other products online. They had a very large data breach in 2012. What wound up happening is names were taken, credit card numbers, personal details, but Zappos had done what it was supposed to, and it encrypted the data. So what was stolen? Gibberish. Now, what should you encrypt? Pretty much everything. You should encrypt the data on your network, you should encrypt your computers, you should encrypt mobile devices, any backups, even little individual stick drives. And it doesn't have to be expensive. There are even some really well-done free encryptions. One in particular I would mention is called TrueCrypt. There are several other ones. You can meet with a security expert if you'd like to talk about which ones to get. You can even look them up online. There are a number of good sites which we'll talk about which ones are good. One I would recommend is called top10reviews.com. It's run by the folks who do Tech News Daily, and it's actually pretty well done. Now, one other great thing about encryption is that there are now a number of US federal and state laws dealing with data breaches. And the punishments can be pretty bad. If you're dealing with any what's called personal health information in a healthcare setting, doctor's or dentist's office, or any vendors dealing with them, the laws HIPAA and HITECH can put some pretty nasty fines on those. But those almost always apply to unencrypted data. So if that lost laptop was encrypted, you might be just fine. Now, one other thing I would just mention in passing, if you happen to do one of those backups using what's called cloud storage, where it's basically stored somewhere else, you might want to make it a point to use what I would call non-proprietary encryption, meaning if you're sending it to Apple's iCloud, don't use Apple's encryption, because Apple can break that encryption. They can encrypt and decrypt their own stuff. Now, that could be not a big deal, but if it's, say, a subpoena in a lawsuit, if there's a warrant from the police, they'll send over unencrypted data. Now, if you encrypt it with something else, perhaps the TrueCrypt I mentioned earlier, that's not a problem because Apple themselves can't decrypt it. That said, thank you so much for your time. Have a fantastic week. See you next week.